Hey everybody, what happened? What's happening in Minneapolis wasn't. It's not just a protest that got out of hand. It's a system that's switching on. A single law enforcement incident that was reframed within minutes as murder and produced tens of thousands of protesters coming out in sub-zero temperatures, and then coordinated their tactics across multiple cities, identical messaging nationwide, and mobs actively hunting federal agents in their hotels. That doesn't happen by accident. That happens when a trigger gets pulled inside a machine that's already built. Now, this is not about grief or anger or even immigration. It's about a playbook that's designed to turn isolated events into national chaos, to convert street violence into political leverage, and to use disorder itself as fuel for the aggregation of power. And what you're looking at here is not an uprising of people. It's a managed insurgency that's hiding in the language of protest. So let's break down how we got here. And while I hate to say I told you so, I'm going to show you when I told you on this channel this would happen. Before we do that, though, let's get rid of that. I'm Chuck Holton, and thank you for watching The Hot Zone. Do me a favor and put in the chat where you're watching from, and make sure you hit the like button and subscribe to the channel and all that good stuff. It really does help the algorithm if you just hit that like button. And so it's just an easy thing that you can do. It doesn't cost you anything to help out the channel. Thank you very much for watching today. I'm coming to you from Panama right now, getting ready for my next trip, and we'll talk about that toward the end. If you have questions, put them in the comments, and Connie will star them, and then I'll take a look at them toward the end. Now, before we get into this, look, all of this chaos, managed or planned or not, is going to be really good for certain things in the market. One of those is gold. Now, if you don't have one of these things, you should get one. This is a gold maple leaf, and it's about the size of a 50-cent piece, and it's worth about $4,400 or so at the moment. I travel with one of these just in case I get in a bind and need to raise some money real fast. And HSBC says they believe that the price of gold could hit $5,000 inside the first half of 2026. At the same time, though, they're warning that investors should expect anything but a smooth ride to get there. So if you are optimistic about America, if you're optimistic about the market, then putting your stuff in just stocks and mutual funds is not always the best idea, because if you're getting close to retirement, or if you're in retirement, you can't afford to have big swings in the value of your income. So buying gold is a great way to smooth that out. And the best place to get it is Preserve Gold. Our friends over there are great to work with. They're really nice. You can call them on the phone, or you can just text 5050, text the word Chuck to 50505, and they'll send you a free wealth protection guide, so you don't have to talk to anybody if you don't want to. But I've heard from a lot of you who've taken my advice on this and have gotten gold and are very happy that you did. So we appreciate Preserve Gold for sponsoring a podcast, but I really do think it's a public service to the people who watch, because it has done a lot of good for a lot of people. And Preserve Gold is, like I say, it's a great company to work with. They only deal with physical gold and silver like this here, and they'll help you get it at your house, or they'll help you put it into your retirement plan. So check them out. Thank you to Preserve Gold for sponsoring us. Now, let's talk about what's going on in Minneapolis. The protests originated from an ICE operation that happened on the 7th of January, which then escalated into a fatal confrontation. By January 11th, 4 days later, the situation had evolved into a large-scale mobilization of protesters, characterized by significant unrest and let's just say, a robust federal response, I guess you could call it that. Now, the shooting that happened on January 7th happened. A lot of people have forgotten about this. They've forgotten what the ICE agents were doing in Minneapolis at that time. Well, they were conducting targeted removals of that day 37 Somali nationals in Minneapolis who had already received final deportation orders but refused to leave. And so this group of 37 Somalis included 9 individuals who were convicted of violent felonies. Not the kind of people we really want in our society. To say nothing of the fact of the massive fraud that's been uncovered by the Somali community in Minneapolis and elsewhere around the country. Massive to the tune of about $150 for every man, woman, and child on the United States. And so they were there to carry out a legally sanctioned removal of Somali nationals who needed to go back to Somalia, but refused to do so. Now, during that operation, a woman named Renee Nicole Good rammed her vehicle into an ICE SUV. She had come from far away to do that with her wife, her lesbian lover, and they had come specifically to interfere with ICE, which is a crime. She then rammed her vehicle into one of their SUVs, and according to the analysis and what I've seen from the body cam footage, it confirms that that's what's happened and shows that she ignored commands and then forced agents to respond with lethal force when she tried to run one of them over. Legal analysts have taken a look at that and described it as a justified shoot. Now, this event was immediately framed by activists as a martyr narrative. And that was done intentionally to fuel protests and opposition to federal law enforcement that's going on in the area. Tens of thousands of protesters converged on Minneapolis from all over the country. These are not just people in Minneapolis. Actually, I would say the majority of them probably are not. Many of them are professional protesters. They do this for a living. They travel all around the country. They go to all these protests, and many of them are trust fund babies, or they still get money from mama and they live in her basement whenever they're home. A bunch of incels who are just looking for some meaning and purpose in their life. And so over the course of the weekend, the 9th through the 11th, even though the temperatures were sub-zero, the violence continued to rise. And we saw violence against officers. We saw assaults on officers. We saw assaults on civilians, journalists. We saw graffiti being painted on people's houses. We saw things being set on fire. So, of course, all of your normal mainstream media outlets describe the protests as mostly peaceful. And what they're saying is, if there's 10,000 people at the protest and only 2,000 of them are actually engaging in violence, well, then it's mostly peaceful. But that's not actually accurate, because even those people who were not throwing frozen water bottles at the police, even those people who were not, setting things on fire or trying to block the police from doing their job, were providing cover for those who were, just by virtue of the fact they were there. They were there screaming at the police. And what we've seen is that this has continued to escalate over the last few days. Now, I don't know if this is from last night or the night before, but this shot shows something we see very commonly in these kind of riots. I should quit calling them protests, because they're not protests, they're riots. They go by the biggest fireworks you can get, the kind that you would have at a citywide fireworks display in your town on the 4th of July. And they fire these things direct line of sight at the police officers or the federal agents that are trying to quell the protest. This is deadly. It's extremely dangerous. I mean, I really believe that people who get caught doing this, the problem is catching them, but people who get caught doing this should be charged with attempted murder. I believe that if a federal agent sees somebody about to launch one of these mortars at them, they should be able to respond directly at that person with live fire, deadly force, to put a stop to it. But take a look at what it looks like. Hold on. I got to take the other one down. Let's try that again. Now I've got the sound turned off on this because there's a lot of profanity in there, but you can see the fireworks going off there. I'll back this up so you can see it again. Some weirdo dancing. And then here comes the mortar round. Boom. And it goes off. Now, fortunately, looks like nobody was injured there, but there wasn't just one of these that was fired. There were many of them that were fired at the federal agents around the ICE facility that night. And if you want to see more of those videos, go look at BGO on the scene, BG on the scene on Twitter. That's where this came from. Shout out to that journalist. So these were anything but peaceful. There were dozens of arrests made for unlawful assembly and for assault. One police officer was injured over the weekend. Pre-frozen water bottles, as I mentioned before, and other projectiles, rocks and things, were used to smash vehicles and to injure law enforcement and journalists. As a matter of fact, Nick Sortor had his car just almost destroyed by protesters, and here's him talking about that.
Spray painted. You said these people were trying to kill you. Well, if they pulled you out of the truck, I'm not sure they were going to give you a big, French kiss.
Right, exactly, Laura. And as you can see, the windows in the back there that were broken using the frozen water bottles. It's an Antifa tactic, very classic. They pre-position these frozen bottles that are like bricks all over the place so they can use them against people like me and federal agents because they're essentially weapons. You end up getting hit with one of those things straight to the head, you're going to end up with brain damage, and they know that. And so if I didn't drive away right then at that time, they were going to use them against me and my passenger, Cam Higbee, who was another journalist. And I'm glad we did. I thank the Lord that he told me right then to go. I gave them 15 minutes of warning to get out of the way. And I feel like that was more than enough time to, finally disperse out from the front of my vehicle. They had already broken a window. We were on the phone with Minneapolis police. And I was telling them, you got to get here. You got to get here because I'm not going to have a choice. If they try to disable my vehicle or they break a window, I have to go. So you guys need to get here and do something. And of course, they didn't show up. So this is the result. No, they don't show up. No.
So, of course, the police did not show up. Those two men were eminently justified in driving away like that. As a matter of fact, they should have done it earlier. They certainly had the reason to do it. Look, nobody has the right to sequester you in your vehicle, not let you get out of the vehicle, and then start bashing your vehicle, breaking your vehicle down. That is the threat of deadly force. You have the right to get out of there. And if there are people standing in front of your vehicle, it's on them. Now, some places around the country are going to look at that a little differently. If you're in Florida, floor it. But if you're in Minneapolis, we'll see if Nick Sortor ends up getting, arrested or charged with anything for that. I kind of doubt it because he's got some high-ranking people in his corner. Now, on top of that, it wasn't just journalists and civilians that were being inconvenienced by these people. They were actively hunting for federal agents. smashing windows in the process. They went to the Canopy Hilton and the Depot Hotel to hunt for federal agents. I have some footage of that is pretty disturbing, just because just watch what this girl does. This is really disturbing. You see here, she spits on this guy. Rap just spits right in his face. Now, I'll just tell you, the spitting on someone is battery. That is no different than slapping them or punching them. And so he could have hauled off and punched that girl right in the face if he had wanted to. He showed great restraint and let her spit on him. And, you know, this just shows you something about mob mentality, because I would venture to say that in her everyday life, that absolutely classless female does not just go around spitting on people, every day. That's probably something she was taught not to do as a child, I would hope. And it's probably, obviously it's something that would get you fired from your work. Let's hope that somebody figures out who that girl is and contacts her job and says, do you really want somebody like this working for you? That sort of thing happens all the time nowadays. But with mob mentality, when the mob takes over, people will do things that they would have never in their wildest dreams thought about doing when they're in their right mind. So she just spit in that guy's face. They ended up breaking a bunch of windows in that hotel. They went, again, door to door, searching for these guys. They stayed outside the hotel all night long, setting off fireworks, banging on drums, blowing whistles, keeping not just any federal agents that happen to be there, but everybody within a 3-block radius stayed awake all night. And I tell you what, that's my pet peeve. People who are so inconsiderate, because you can bet that there are lots of working class people who are just trying to make a living that were staying in that hotel, linemen, plumbers, businessmen, things like that. And when you rob somebody of a night of sleep, you are robbing them. You're stealing a portion of their life. You're murdering a portion of their life, and they can't get that back. And so the next day they're not going to perform. They're not going to be able to do their job as well. They could literally be putting people in danger. If they're a lineman or something like that, they could be putting their own lives and the lives of others in danger. That is the kind of thing. And the problem is when you've got 10,000 people doing it, you just can't arrest everybody. Now, kudos to Kristi Noem for sending another several thousand agents up to Minneapolis to try to get a handle on all this violence. But the more agents they send, it seems like the more protesters show up. The protesters are forming human shields to protect these criminal, illegal aliens from being deported. They're literally surrounding them and not letting the federal agents get to them do their job. So the federal agents have to arrest the protesters first, and before they can even get to any of the illegals that they're there to remove. They use their vehicles to block law enforcement operations. You see them as law enforcement is forced to use pepper balls and flashbangs. They will run up and throw them back at law enforcement or put a bucket on top of them so that they are ineffective. I've seen them shining green lasers in the law enforcement officers' eyes. That's battery. That should be a felony. And it should be met with lethal force, I believe. Now, virtually all of the messaging coming out from the left is absolute propaganda. And it is absolute propaganda. Now, I wanted you to listen to this absolute clown of a mayor that they have for Minneapolis talking about this, and I'm going to come back and comment on what he has to say.
Yeah. I mean, we don't use the word invasion lightly. What we are seeing is thousands, plural, thousands of federal agents coming into our city. And yeah, they're having a tremendous impact on day-to-day life. And it's a negative one. And whether that's kids that are trying to get to school or businesses that are trying to open, that's police officers that are responding to 911 calls. It's just about being able to conduct daily life right here in our city. And look, this is not about fraud. When you have a fraudster, you investigate, you charge, you prosecute, you hold the person accountable, and then they get put in jail as an individual. They get put in jail as an individual. You do not hold an entire community or an entire city accountable for the actions of the fraudsters. That's not a novel concept. That's just the way this works in American society.
So he's using a massive straw man argument there. You know, this is not about fraud. He's right. It's not about fraud. It's about illegal immigration. It's about people, criminal illegal aliens refusing to abide by a legal order for them to leave. So I mean, yeah, there's a lot of fraud involved, but they're not going up there. Oh, Minneapolis had a lot of fraud, so we're going to go up there and we're going to hold the city hostage. No, they're not doing that at all. As a matter of fact, there wouldn't be thousands of law enforcement officers in Minneapolis if it wasn't for guys like Jacob Frey calling on people in Minneapolis to rise up and stop those law enforcement officers from doing their jobs. They wouldn't need thousands of them there if they would just allow them to do their jobs and rid their community of the criminal element that they are there to remove. This is such a lame excuse. You know, he's talking about, you know, we're just trying to go to school here. We just want to live our lives, and just, you know, it's like it's all the federal government's fault, but it's not the federal government's fault. And what I want to show you, I'm going to go into an article that was written by a woman called, well, she calls herself Data Republican on X. And so I'm going to show you a picture of the article that she posted on X the other day. And I'm going to be going off this article for some of what I'm going to talk about here in a minute. It's called Minnesota as a Systems Failure, How NGOs Process Dissent Until Reality No Longer Matters. See, that's what you just saw with Jacob Frey and what he was saying. See, he was not describing the reality of the situation, because the reality of the situation doesn't align with his narrative. And so he just made up a narrative that did align with his political leanings. But there's more to it than that. See, this is not, he called it an invasion. It's not an invasion, folks. And some people have said, of course, it's not an invasion by the federal agents, because federal agents can go anywhere they want in the United States. I mean, that's just easy, simple, elementary school logic. American law enforcement officers can enforce the law in America. Hello. Okay. So it's not an invasion. Some people have called what the protesters are doing an insurrection. People like to bandy that term around because of the January 6th connotations there and what they called that. But it's not an insurrection. It's actually an insurgency. Let me explain the difference. An insurrection is a sudden event that catalyzes people into action. It's usually not very organized. It's chaotic. It's where something happens to make people get so angry just right off the cuff that they rise up and overthrow the authority that caused the thing that got them riled up in the first place. That's an insurrection. An insurgency is a planned, organized, and led and funded movement to completely overthrow a government or an authority structure. So the difference is the organization and planning that goes on behind it. And what I'm submitting to you, and what Data Republican was saying in her article, is that this is not an insurrection. This is not disorganized mob just rising up. This is completely planned and organized, and has been planned and organized for years before President Trump even took office. Now, I want to show you just a little, if I can find it here, a little excerpt from a video that I made in September of 2024. Okay. And in September of 2024, I started saying, folks, we have an election coming up. I don't know who's going to win, but I can tell you one thing. If President Trump wins, the left is going to do for the 4 years of his second term exactly what they did for the 4 years of his first term. And that is manufacture outrage, look for a way to set the nation on fire, to make chaos reign in the streets, so that people will be so tired of all the chaos that they're just going to go, I don't want to vote for that kind of chaos again. And I'm going to vote for whatever's going to be less chaos, even if it's worse for America. And so this is me in September of 2024 talking about it. Presidential election is going to be the most contentious of our lifetimes, without a doubt. And either way it goes, things are not going to be good. If Donald Trump wins, let's talk about what might be coming. If Donald Trump gets elected, it's going to get lit. It's on for not just a day or two. It's going to be on probably for all 4 years that he's in office. I was there covering the riots in Portland. I was covering the riots in Seattle. I was covering Black Lives Matter protests. So I've seen how bad it can get. And believe me, it can get very bad. If I've learned anything in the last 20 years, it's craziness can happen at the drop of a hat. So look, folks, I think that this is urgent. I think that in a matter of less than 60 days, you're going to need to be more prepared for mayhem and a loss of civility and possibly a breakdown in the logistics supply train than you are now. And so I want to encourage you to think very hard about how you can get yourself more prepared in the weeks to come before the election. Okay, so I then turned to the notes from that talk, which went on for several podcasts. You can go back and watch them. They're still there, available on YouTube. I turned all the notes from that into the book, Death of Civilization. And it's not just about predicting and forecasting what the left is going to do. It's about helping you know what you can do about it to fight back and to keep it from happening. If you don't have a copy of Death of Civilization, I'd recommend that you go get one. You can get them on Amazon in softcover, or you can become a supporter over at chuckholton.com, and you can get a free PDF download of the book by becoming a supporter over there. I haven't come up with an audio version yet. I really need to do that. I just haven't had a chance. But I have another book that's coming out in April that's sort of a sequel to this. This is a book about what you and your family can do in your neighborhood to improve your chances of survival in the case of a loss of civility, or and to make it less likely that there will be a loss of civility in your neighborhood. Okay, so that's for you and your family. My new book, which is called Red Teams, is coming out in April, and it's about your using your church, making your church into the place it was meant to be, that will act as a dilutive agent to the chaos that surrounds it, that will reach out to the people around your church who are not members of the church, but who will definitely need help in case of a loss of civility or a natural disaster or whatever. And so again, if you are a supporter over at chuckholton.com, you're going to be able to get excerpts of that book. Actually, there's some already posted up over there. And since this book is being published by a publisher, I can't give away free copies on of the full book on chuckholton.com, but we'll have some giveaways and some signed copies and things like that when it comes out. So looking forward to that. Now, let's go. Let me get rid of that. Let's go on to talk more about this kind of orchestrated insurrection thesis. Now, a core argument that Data Republican is making is that the Minneapolis protests are not a grassroots movement. They're planned and funded operation that's following a tried and tested playbook. The thesis has parallels to past events as well, like the Black Lives Matter movement. And essentially what it is that these organizations, there's a lot of NGOs out there that make their living off of chaos and disaster. That's how they make their money. Black Lives Matter is a perfect example of that. Black Lives Matter was launched actually prior to the, I believe, prior to the killing of, I just spaced on the guy's name. The guy that got killed. You guys will tell me in the chat here in a second. Why am I just spacing on that? Whew, senior moment. Anyway, I believe that Black Lives Matter actually started prior to his death at the hands of the police in Minneapolis again. But it really took off and became a sort of self-fulfilling prophecy in a way, in that, you know, they exist to push back against their perceived racism against Black people. When it comes, Floyd, yeah, fentanyl Floyd, George Floyd, thank you. They exist to push back against that, but their very existence, because of the way that they do things, their rioting and burning and destroying and things like that, actually creates more negative feeling against the Black community. So it doesn't solve anything. It actually perpetuates the problem. And that is their core strategy, because it's extremely profitable. I mean, the Black Lives Matter movement goes out and burns down cities, causing more than $2 billion in damage. And what does corporate America do? They reward Black Lives Matter, because everybody wants to pretend that they're on the side of the cool kids. In 2021, they made $90 million that year alone, 75 million the next year. And of course, this money didn't go to education projects or to micro loans to businessmen in the Black community to try to, make their lives better. It didn't go to anything like that. It went to luxury homes and cars and trips for the leaders of the Black Lives Matter movement. And it went largely to facilitate these kinds of what they call direct actions. That's the riots that they're doing. They put money right back into facilitating more of those, because that's where their bread and butter is. Now, they're not by any stretch the only organization that does this. Right now, I've identified a bunch of organizations that are facilitating, encouraging, or funding the Minnesota protests, and not just Minnesota, but Minnesota, Portland, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Atlanta, et cetera, all over the country, New York. And this list is not comprehensive by any stretch. I just did a quick couple of Google searches and found a list of organizations that are involved with these protests. One of them is called Indivisible. I want to show you their website here. Indivisible Twin Cities. Indivisible says, do you want to help resist the extremist MAGA agenda? So MAGA, if you recall, stands for Make America Great Again. They want to resist that. They don't want America to be great again. They want America to be down the toilet like it was during the Biden administration, apparently. So they are encouraging people to show up to these protests, help organize a protest in your town, act to get a hold of your representatives and hold them accountable, and then vote. But of course, they do also want you to donate. That's right here at the top. Okay. Now, that's not the only one. There's another one called CHIRLA, and CHIRLA stands for, CHIRLA is the Coalition for Humane Immigrant Rights. And they got 34 million. Now Indivisible Project, they get most of their money from donors, not from the government. Thank God. But those donors include the George Soros owned Open Society Action Fund and others. And we're talking, tens of millions of dollars each year in grants. They got 7 new grants in 2024, all from private company or private NGOs that are basically designed to funnel money to these other more active organizations. So Open Society Fund can say, we don't actually support any, violent uprisings or anything like that. That's right. They don't. They just support the organizations who do. And they think that 1 degree of separation somehow exonerates them from being involved in assisting and facilitating this violence, but it doesn't. Now, CHIRLA, going back to them, let's see if I can go back to this one. Of course, they've got a woman in a burqa there, take action, become a member, to have a $60 family membership, $100 community membership. But so it looks like, oh, this is a grassroots organization as well. They're just looking for little $60 donations to help DACA people get citizenships and to work on family unity. I mean, who wouldn't want family unity? Of course, we love family unity. I can go on and on about that, but suffice it to say that all of that is kind of a front because, as I said, CHIRLA got $34 million in grants from the U.S. taxpayer in 2024 alone. They've got all sorts of, and what they do is they have people whose job it is to sit there and write government grants, try to apply for government grants. That's all they do full time. And they just find a way to couch what they're doing as something that you can get a grant for. So they have a grant program that's called the Citizenship and Integration Grant Program. Okay, I'm not sure what that exactly entails, but you can see how your tax dollars going to CHIRLA and CHIRLA using them to support these violent protests against legal law enforcement activity is probably not what the Citizenship and Integration Grant Program was meant for. And that's, in the millions of dollars annually. There's another one that's very active in Minneapolis because of the large Muslim community up there called the Council on American Islamic Relations, or CARE. You've probably heard about them. Now, they had been receiving money from the federal government under the Biden administration, about $500,000 cumulatively. But that was frozen in 2025 when President Trump took office. And thank you to President Trump for cutting off that funding. However, that $9 billion in fraud that we've been talking about in Minneapolis that was going to predominantly Somali-owned organizations, how many millions of that $9 billion do you think went to the Council for American Islamic Relations? Well, it's not really possible to tell without a comprehensive audit of CARE, but just knowing what we know about that community, I would say that it is highly likely that the majority of their funding, not just a little bit, came from U.S. taxpayer dollars that were stolen via fraud by Somali-run businesses or business fronts in Minneapolis and elsewhere over the past 5-10 years. I just went back the other day and looked up the stories that I did on this fraud, and they were in 2018. In December 2018, I went to Minneapolis and I made reports about childcare fraud and how that money was being, and welfare fraud, and how that money was being taken, put into suitcases, flown to Somalia, and used to support al-Shabaab. But on top of that, they weren't just sending money. They were sending their teenagers. They were recruiting young men from Minneapolis who have, many of them, American visas or passports so that they can come back into the United States. They were taking them to Somalia, teaching them to fight with the al-Shabaab, Islamic State, sort of nexus there, and then sending them back to the United States. That it's been out there for so long. Now, because of the great work that was done by Nick Shirley, it's come to the forefront. But I was actually talking about this in 2018. Nobody would listen. People said we were crazy. So that's not surprising. Okay. Now, I need to get over to questions, so I'm going to stop it there. I had a lot more to that, but the bottom line is there is ample evidence of orchestration and funding of these NGOs that are waiting for a catalyst, waiting for some news event to happen that they can spin in their favor, that they can spin to manufacture outrage among their base. And then they call out the troops, they create chaos and mayhem, and they make money doing it. And a large amount of that money comes from the U.S. taxpayer. This is what Data Republican meant when she's called this a failure as a systems problem. It's a systems failure. Our system, which is designed to have NGOs do the work of charity so that the government doesn't have to, many of them are getting their money from the government, and then they're not actually doing charitable work with it. They're putting it to work to destroy America as we know it. And they're being vastly successful at it. But again, if you get my book, you can find out what you can do about that and how you can put a stop to it. Okay, so let's get over to some of our questions. We'll start with the first question. Did you know the New York Times reported Trump told them that he would bomb Iran, but he doesn't want regime change? Yeah, I've been reading all that information. We talked about Iran yesterday, and I'm sure we'll talk about it some more when and if there is an attack on Iran or Israel by Iran. But we're not going to talk about it today because I'm going to try to get through these questions on the topic. Colin Ross from Melbourne, Australia says, will Ukraine, it's not called the Ukraine anymore. Will Ukraine one day get the resources to go on the offensive to take back fallen land from Russia? They actually are doing so right now. You're not hearing a lot about it in the news, but Ukraine is retaking ground. They just retook the city of Kupiansk, which I've visited before, but it was taken by the Russians, and now the Russians have lost it to the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians have a much larger army now than the Russians do in Ukraine. And the Ukrainians are building momentum and starting to take back their land. So they got a long way to go, and it's still really hard there. Lots of bombs coming in, killing civilians and knocking out electricity and all that stuff. But you have no idea how resilient the Ukrainian people are. Okay, let's go on to the next one. Oops, sorry, I did that. Let's show that one. How big and extensive of a conspiracy is there behind this agenda to take down America from the inside? Well, that's kind of what I'm trying to point out. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is called journalism. And all you have to do is just go start Googling around and you can find all this information out there. This is all open source stuff. There and believe me, if it's that easy to find on the internet from reputable sources, from government data and all that sort of thing, then this is just the tip of the iceberg, because it's never possible to find all of the corruption. You can only usually just see a little bit of it. Okay. So it is quite a conspiracy for sure. Next question. What do you think about the Promethean action? Do you think Trump is using War Plan Red to end 80 years of British influence over U.S. foreign policy with Greenland and NATO? If you want a conspiracy theory, there's your conspiracy theory right there, Whitney. Yeah, I'm not a subscriber to that conspiracy theory. Let's move on. Who's behind this? Why don't they deal strongly with them? Well, I just showed you. It's the Soros monolith. It's even the U.S. government that's behind it. The U.S. government under Democratic administrations has been intentionally funding these organizations. And I was reporting on that probably as far back as like 2009. I went to there's a radical environmentalist group called Earth First, and they go around and burn down car dealerships and spike trees and stuff like that. And I reported on some of those. I infiltrated one of their organizations in West Virginia, and they showed me their grant writers. And these people over here, their job is to write grants from the federal government. And they showed me how they got grants from the organizations like the Sierra Club that didn't want to dirty their hands with direct action against what they saw as the threat to climate change. But they gave money to Earth First, and then Earth First did it. And then they explained to me how they use that money to pay for their bail when they get arrested, and then go out and do it again tomorrow and pay for their bail again, because a trespassing charge is like a traffic ticket, and you are a parking ticket, really. And so, I mean, you can get as many of them as you want as long as you pay them. So they would just pay the $245 every day and then go get arrested again. My buddy, who's a state trooper in West Virginia, arrested, some celebrities. Daryl Hannah was one of them, got arrested out there, and, pay her $245. And then she gets to have the Instagram shot of, her out there protesting for the environment. So this is something that's been going on for a long time. And unfortunately, far too much of it is funded by the federal government, either willingly or unwillingly. Next question. What happened to Nick Sortor the other night? So I showed, who is behind this? Why don't they deal strong? I already got that part. So let's go to the next one, babe. Nick Sortor was accosted. He was attacked. He had people beating him up. He had to fight to defend himself. Then he got in his vehicle. They busted up his vehicle until he had to flee for his life. And I showed the video of that. So you saw that. Okay. Next question. Why is Trump's ballroom at the White House a matter of national security? Is there something else going on there with the insurgents, with the urgency to demolish and begin construction? It's a real good question. I haven't looked into that a whole lot. I mean, President Trump likes ostentatious things, and I would tend to agree that the White House was kind of due for a renovation, needed some upgrades. Or you go to even small countries and go to their presidential buildings, and they're much larger and nicer than the White House. And so President Trump, I think, says, well, for the greatest country on planet Earth, we ought to have the greatest White House on planet Earth. And that's what he's doing. Now, I've heard the talk about whether they're building a secret, bunker system under whatever. Maybe they are. If so, great. Hope they do. We need all those we can get. So, all right, next question. Why can't the president call for martial law and the Insurrection Act? He could declare martial law, and he could send in the troops, but what he's trying to avoid is galvanizing the response against him. If you see U.S. troops firing on American protesters, that's not a good look. And the political cost of that is too high. President Trump likely is, I mean, he might do it. Nobody knows what President Trump's going to do, but the political calculus there is pretty costly. Okay. All right. Next question. Tell us a little bit about the difference of Iranian protesters and U.S. protesters from Sweden with Love. Very good question. The protesters here's the biggest difference. The protesters in the United States, by and large, are from wealthy families. Would I say wealthy? Even middle-class families in America are wealthy globally. They're not, they may not be working, but they don't work as a choice, not because they can't find a job or they can't make a living. Again, many of these people make it their job to go around the country and protest, because you'll see the same people. Andy Ngo, how do you say his last name? He does great reporting on this. He actually identifies these protesters and then tracks them across the country as they go from protest to protest to protest. And and it doesn't matter what the protest is about necessarily. It's just if it's an LGBT, HTTV protest, if it's a Black Lives Matter protest, if it's an anti-gun protest, if it's a anti-Trump protest, whatever, pro-abortion protest, they'll go to all of them. So it's a professional gig for them. They actually make money doing this. And I've explained it before, how people actually can make money getting arrested over and over again, because they get arrested in a place like Minneapolis or Portland, and then they post bail. They then sue the city for unlawful use of force or excessive force or something like that. And the city has a standing policy that they're not going to take those cases to the mat. They're just going to settle them out of court. So they have a standard amount of money, $30,000 or so, that they'll say, look, we'll give you $30,000 just to drop your case. And so then they drop their case, and then they go do it again, and they do it again, and they do it again. And they actually make money doing this. Okay. They don't even have to pay for their own bail. There are organizations that raise money to pay for their bail. And when the case gets dropped, they get that money back. So next question, why are they not arrested? Well, let me finish that last question first. In Iran, you're talking about an actual organic uprising of the people who are fed up and with the inability to make money, to survive out there. They don't have any water. They don't have any electricity. Can you imagine? And then let me just, caveat or segue that by saying, can you imagine if you look at what's happening in Minneapolis right now, just with the lights on, heat, those protesters can go throw rocks at the cops and then step around the corner for a cup of coffee at Starbucks. No problem. Go stay in a nice hotel, whatever they want. Can you imagine the violence that would break out if America was in the situation that Iran is in? If there was no electricity, if there was no water, if the government was so corrupt that and was, murdering the people with live fire ammunition. Can you imagine what America would look like? I don't want to even think about it, but that day may come. Okay, next question. Why are they not arrested? Well, I think we answered that. The police, there were many who were arrested by federal agents. Kristi Noem says those people will be charged federally, and they're not going to be able to just bail themselves out of jail and, sue the city and all that. They're not going to be able to go through that process. the city, because it's a left-wing jurisdiction, the mayor does not allow the police to enforce the law around these protests. And so that's why they're not being arrested in places like Minneapolis and Portland and Los Angeles. Okay. Next question. Jack from Indiana says, what do you think the answer is? How does law enforcement actually get control of the crowds? Should the laws be changed? I think there are some laws that should be changed. They should be changed to look more like the laws in Florida, with a very strong stand your ground, with a very strong constitutional carry, and with, laws passed that will allow them to confiscate it. Look, these people are Antifa, but they're not calling themselves Antifa anymore because President Trump declared Antifa as a terror group. So they just stopped calling themselves Antifa. But they're still the same people doing the same things. So they need to allow the federal government to confiscate these people's assets and to go through them to their, like if they're living in their mom's basement, you confiscate their mom's house too. This is what Israel does in Judea and Samaria. If somebody comes and commits an act of terror on Israeli citizens, they find out where that guy lives and they go demolish that guy's house. It would be better to seize it and sell it, but they just demolish it. It doesn't matter if his whole family lives there. It doesn't matter if there's 20 people living in that house. They demolish the house. And I think that, unfortunately, the government's going to have to start taking a much stronger stance on things. And I personally, do you want to live in a country where there's rule of law and the police are, you have a choice here. Rule of law where the police are empowered to use whatever force is necessary to maintain the rule of law, or would you rather live in a place where the rule of law is not enforced and vigilantes or thugs get to do whatever they want? Neither of those is great, but I would prefer to live in a country with rule of law, even if the police are heavy-handed at it. And that's why people in El Salvador are so much happier today than they were before Bukele took office and instituted the strong hand measures against the cartels down there. Okay, so we need strong hand measures, maybe a giant prison for 80,000 people where we round up all these, pink-haired incels in their dresses and we toss them all together into this thing and let them debauch themselves to death in there. Maybe something like that. These people need to go to jail. They need to feel some consequences. Part of the problem is that most of these incel kids have never had consequences. And life needs to come up and slap them in the face. Those guys are out there LARPing. They think they're just out there having a good time. And look how much fun this is. We can go flip off the police and call them names and throw things at them, and nothing happens to us. This is great. Something needs to start happening to them. And pepper balls is not enough. Okay. And I'm not saying live fire is what they need. I'm just saying they need to do what it takes to crack down on these guys and arrest people who are breaking the law. Point, period, end of story. Next question. Can our court system handle all of the arrests, or will they be overwhelmed? Well, if they're overwhelmed, then we need a bigger court system. Next question. Were the Minnesota police told to stand down? Yes. My understanding is that they were, according to Nick Sortor. He said they were hung up on several times as they called 911. Start Living Now says, do you think Donald Trump has managed to take the heat off of himself when it comes to the Epstein files? We never hear anything more about it after the takedown of Nicolas Maduro. I don't think he decided to take down Nicolas Maduro because of the Epstein files. All of the things that have come out about President Trump and the Epstein files have already come out. If there was anything else, believe me, the Democrats would have released him a long time ago. And the stuff that came out was pretty gross. And in my opinion, would disqualify President Trump from being president. I mean, at least he would disqualify him from me voting for him for president. However, so I think that the Epstein files has run its course. There's not going to be any more gigantic grand revelations out of the Epstein files that are going to light the world on fire. What has been released has been gone through. It's thousands of pages of stuff. And, a lot of people just want so badly for that to be some great conspiracy. I think it's just stupidity. And so I don't subscribe to that conspiracy theory. Next question. George Floyd death by cop, abolish the police narrative. Minnesota woman death by ICE, abolish ICE narrative, paid for pre-planned attempt. Number 2 for riot narrative. Okay, you just pretty much summed up what I've talked about for the entire live. So good for you. That's great job. What's the difference between insurgency and crowd incitement, if any? Well, an insurgency, as I said, is a planned, prepared, organized, and led movement to overthrow a system of authority. Incitement is sending agents provocateurs into a crowd and trying to whip them up into mob frenzy where they will start to commit violence. That's the difference. Next question. I think Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison is a gross human, and you agreed with me recently, and I want to know why. I grew up in Minnesota, so I feel close to this topic. I've been following Keith Ellison for a long time, and everything he has done has been counterproductive to America, anti-America, very, very communist, and really racist. I mean, he's a flaming racist. Unbelievable. So yeah, he is pretty gross. Next question. Please explain the shopping cart theory. Well, the shopping cart theory is the theory that says that people who put away, if you go somewhere where they put away the shopping carts, where the general population, by and large, puts their shopping carts back in the shopping cart parking spaces out there in the parking lot and doesn't just leave them laying all around the parking lot. That's the kind of community that will be safe, that you'll want to live in. If you go someplace and you go to a store and you see the parking lot is full of shopping carts just everywhere, laying on their side, over in the ditch, whatever, then that's a tell that that is an unsafe environment for you, because people who have the discipline to take the 14 seconds that it takes to push your shopping cart over to the parking spot and then get in your car and leave are the kind of people that you want to live near. Those are the kind of people you want to live with. And incidentally, that's the kind of person that you should want to be. So shame on you if you don't put your shopping carts away. Next question. Do you think Trump's changing foreign policy regards to Greenland and Latin American countries has been long overdue for the long-term survival of America and the free world? No. I think what President Trump is doing about Greenland is counterproductive, and it plays right into Russia's hands. And I'm going to be talking about that next week when I go to Greenland. So I'm on my way there here shortly. Okay. So stay tuned for that. Will you be going to Greenland soon? Yep, I will. And please explain why Trump is pushing to get control of that country. I will explain all of that when I get there, talk to some people on the ground, and bring you the truth from on the ground in Greenland. Next question. What chance do you give for any politician being held accountable for all this fraud? Low. I say it's low because politicians typically cover for each other, and it seems like they never get held accountable for all of this. I mean, in some ways, Tim Walz is being held accountable because he's not running for governor again. He's backed out of the governor's race. So kudos to Nick Shirley for doing that. Okay. Have you looked, thank you, Bolo 2020, whatever that is, 2028. Have you looked into Neville Roy Singham? He's a communist billionaire. Yeah, I've talked about him a lot. And yes, he is, he lives in China, and he is a communist. He's very close to the CCP, and he has been caught paying people to organize these protests. There was one guy that they caught. He was paid $70,000 a year by this communist billionaire to organize protests surrounding immigration and things like that. So they are trying to take down America by making us destroy ourselves. I retired last year. I'm ready to move to Panama sometime at the end of the year. Can you point out some good places? Whoops. Where'd it go? Can you point out some good places to move down there, Chuck? Thanks. Yeah, I mean, there's lots of good places. Depends on what you like. Personally, I don't like heat or tropical humidity or the beach. So I moved up to the mountains. One of the nice things about Panama is that you can take your pick. You can live in some place that's cool, springtime weather all year round, or some place that's summertime all year round. And those are basically your two choices. There's nice city living and nice country living and everything in between. So if you go over to chuckholton.com, I've posted before the article that I wrote about why we moved to Panama, moved our bona fide abode here, still Americans, but why we decided to get a home in Panama. And it had some good recommendations for people that are looking into following our lead. Next question. I saw Trump just said that he would support the Iranians and help is on the way. What are your thoughts on this? Talked about it yesterday. I think President Trump needs to put his money where his mouth is. The people in Iran are counting on that. And if he lets them down, he's going to lose face everywhere, and he's going to strengthen our adversaries in so doing. Last question. Do you think this Iranian public execution planned on Wednesday to get Trump to act or to get to the table? No, I think they're just doing it to try to quell the protests. They figure if we execute a whole bunch of protesters, that'll put a damper on the rest of the protesters. And so that's what they're doing. Okay. All right, folks, we're over an hour, so I'm going to leave it at that. Thank you very much for watching the Hot Zone. I appreciate all of you. Appreciate everything that you do in terms of donating and helping. We've just had somebody, I wish I could, JB Newman. If you're listening, please send me an email, info@holtonnews.com, because I just want to tell you thank you for your generous donations. And you didn't leave us enough information to do that. So yeah, please contact us if you would. And there's a trip going to Panama. We're running in April. That trip is going to be for a small group of people to join my wife and I in our little hometown where we live up here. Spend some time relaxing, spend some time at the Panama Canal, go, see some sights, go hiking if you want, get a massage if you want, that sort of thing. And we've got a few slots left. So if you'd like to join us, please do. You can just send an email to info@holtonnews.com. We'll get you all the information about the trip. And as I said, we've got a couple of slots left. Our trip to Armenia is completely full, but the trip to Panama has still got a couple rooms. So fill those things up, get them while they're hot. One last thing too, folks, I just wanted to remind any of you, if you have sons or grandsons who are between 13 and 17, we're going to be running a summer camp this summer for young men. The idea is to get them off their phones and to teach them some things about leadership, about accountability. We'll teach them some manly skills like land navigation, wilderness survival, stuff like that. It's not a boot camp. It's going to be more of a leadership course. And I'm going to be there running it. We're going to have, it's all run by veterans. So the idea is just to get them off their screens, teach them some things that'll make them more valuable as human beings, especially if there's a crisis. And so it's a week long, August 2nd through the 9th, ages 13 through 17. You can go to frontierforge.org to register, frontierforge.org. And this is our inaugural. We're going to try to do this every year. This is the first one. So if you come this year, you get to be a plank holder. And if you would like to donate to assist with the funding of this endeavor, because we're hoping to be able to raise enough money to not just run a camp every summer, but run a full-time academy for young men that trains them in trades like plumbing and electrical and HVAC, firefighting, things that are desperately needed these days. So if you have a son or a grandson that you'd like to get involved, please just go to frontierforge.org, and there are ways to get involved there, or send us an email at info@holtonnews.com, and we will get you, kind of hooked up if you want to donate or whatever. Okay. So thank you very much for watching. We will see you all again next time, and God bless you. That's all I've got for out here.